Right, folks, here's the word from those in the know. It's 2025, and if your organization or department is still treating social media as an afterthought, you are officially playing catch-up. And it's not just about posting a picture of a ribbon-cutting event and calling it engagement anymore. We're talking real connection, real impact, including interactions originating in the social media space, but ending up as real-life, consequential transactions in the real world. Welcome to the future, and guess what? It's tweeting, it's streaming, and it's sliding into DMs with service delivery updates. So mark your calendars, because tomorrow, June the 30th, the University of Johannesburg Business School will host a thought leadership festival on this exact phenomenon. It's the Social Media Summit for Government 2025, and it's not just a conference, we are told. It's where government meets Gen Z, meets AI, meets strategy in one firestorm of innovation. All right, let's unpack it all with the founder and CEO of Decode Communications, Lorato Tshenkeng, and as well as Kamantha Govender, who's communications manager at the Wits School of Governance. Lorato, let me start with you, because I understand that you are integrally involved in how this came about, the social media summit. So tell me what the objectives are and how it plays itself out.
So, Tulas, good afternoon, and good afternoon to the viewers. In 2020, all of us were locked up due to COVID, and we started seeing government moving a lot better in terms of engaging and connecting with citizens through digital platforms, right? Because if you were to compare 2019, there was a lot of lethargy, and there was a lot of broadcasting. But 2020 was almost the tipping point, right? Decode then set up, we started a report that we call the South African Government Leaders on Twitter report. We're looking at cabinet ministers. One, are they on Twitter? If they are, what it is that they're doing. And people have asked, why Twitter? Think about the storm that happened between President Cyril Ramaphosa and the Rwandan president earlier in this year. So the significance of that platform has almost given a rise of, you are seeing government leaders, you are seeing global leaders utilizing these platforms to connect or at least communicate with a lot of their citizens. And of course, then the intention was to say, as communicators, are we doing enough to, one, maintain the momentum? We saw that the momentum actually broke down. 2020, 2021, 2022, communicators almost reverted back to write press release, blasted, right? So that was really the motivation around saying, we therefore need to have a session where we come together and, one, explore whether we are doing enough. Two, are people skilled? Because that's the other thing, right? Ordinarily, you'd have the youngest people in the room given a phone to say, go and tweet or do this. And we know that communications, if it is not taken as a strategic function in any space, you are going to have lapses, and there'll be problems.
So am I correct in assuming that in this particular summit for this year, the focus is mainly on government and how government uses various types of social media, from Twitter, which you just mentioned, well, now known as X, to Truth Social, that is used by at least one major government leader, the United States president, and others, WhatsApp and the likes.
Sure. So 3 years ago, we set up, the summit. This was now in 2023. So this would be the third, this is the third installment of the social media summit, right? The first one was, in fact, interestingly, the keynote speaker was Prof. Mosamo Shabela, who's the vice chancellor at UCT. And one of the key provocations there was to say, what is this thing that government communicators believe that they are not accountable to citizens? Instead, they are accountable to their political principles. And you see that with the way they would say the minister has arrived, or so mayor so-and-so has arrived. So in the third installment now, we're looking at we are seeing a lot of what we call the power shift. Citizens are now dictating what conversations should be had, how they should be had, instead of previously where it was just, almost a one-way kind of conversation. So we're examining the power of the citizen and what should government communicators be thinking about that power. You think about TikTok. TikTok is literally shifting how conversations are happening, how people are responding to content. Think about podcasting as well, right? Again, it is doing exactly that, where you're realizing people used to believe in, or at least consume traditional media platforms such as radio and TV. But we now need to examine, what does it mean for, if you are a communicator in Taung, where I come from, right? Where people struggle with data to listen to that podcast. But if you are there, what are the tools that and skills that you require to be empowered to be able to connect with them?
Kamantha, let me bring you into this conversation. What for you does success look like when government effectively government and governance institutions effectively harness the power of social media in a way that is impactful and advances service delivery? And when you answer that question, perhaps address the extent to which in our own universe, our governmental universe, we are living up to that measure of success.
I think the cornerstone measurement for me would be the two-way engagement process. So what happens in communication typically is government communication can be very top-down. So I think the more government communicates and responds to citizens to the exact points is very important. So I know it's very challenging in situations during times of crisis where for them to give a definitive response, that's not always possible. But I think being as honest and transparent as possible is a key measure for me in government communication, especially during crisis communications, which is an aspect that we're going to focus on Tuesday during my session that I'm moderating. So part of that is to have visibility. And when I talk about visibility, I mean the impact of visuals, and not necessarily visuals that are related to the crisis, but to the actual people that you want to hear from, so that it creates authentic communication.
And if I stick with you, Kamantha, what about the element that says accessibility, facilitating accessibility and responsiveness? Because a lot of us who interact with financial institutions, for example, will know that we've gotten to a point where it's as simple as clicking on a link and it automatically opens your WhatsApp from where you can then, have your query addressed. Usually by a chatbot, but when it reaches a certain point, someone will take up that query and respond to it. To what extent are we seeing government playing in that space, or should we be seeing government playing in that space?
So interestingly enough, I just went through a research report that suggested AI communication in the corporate space. It is being received, but there's more emphasis on human-centered communication. So I think there's a level of responsibilities that can be automated, and it's important. But I think even you as a consumer, an ordinary consumer, at the end of the day, there comes a touch point that needs to have that human communication element in order to make it legitimate. And I think as South Africans, when we have frustrations, especially around service delivery, we want to be able to have direct communication, which is very, very important. And I think it has to be a bit of both. And I think direct communication, immediate communication is essential during a crisis. But I think there's so much more that can be done in public sector communications. And I think this forum gives us the opportunity to see what the best practices are in government. But for me as a communicator, especially at the Wits School of Governance, it's also about what is the next practice. Yeah. Because I know we love using, AI all the time, but at the end of the day, it's what is meaningful and a conversation with citizens that are absolutely transparent and accountable. That's important as well.
Lorato, your experience straddles both public and private sector. What are some of those best practices that that Kamantha is talking to in as far as the effective harnessing of social media goes?
Sure. So one of the things, and to the point that you're talking about, or it is the example used with financial service institutions, right? They use a lot of social CRM, whereas government institutions don't. And think about the many
customer
relationship, social customer relationship management, right? And the think about the many touch points that whether it's clinics where people ordinarily, if you are a chronic patient, you only get medication on a particular day. But when your medication has not arrived, imagine if you had that capability or the ability to, somebody will WhatsApp you and then you know that you don't have to make the trip. Sometimes it's your last taxi fare. And it's almost in that where you then ask, to say, or at least we are advocating for what the private sector has been able to adopt, assists a lot of us to be able to save time, conveniently access certain information. And if you are to replicate that in the public sector. You're going to help people
That would
save
be a
time.
game changer. I mean,
absolutely.
If I can interact one way or another with the clinic, then I know that my medication is not there.
Yes.
I stay at home. I don't waste taxi fare. Absolutely great example. Yeah.
And then the other one, of course, is the adoption of AI, right? Where, in fact, we have Aslam Levy, who's e-government lead in the Western Cape, who will be talking. His topic says, WhatsApp, AI is in our WhatsApp group. Are you there? And we are seeing, and it's not lethargy as such, Tulas, it's more fear, right? People are worried about, so if my manager that knows that I'm a copywriter, I produce, either a speech or speaking notes, from my own critical thinking. If I produce it with AI and I do it in 3 minutes, will they think that I'm now redundant? So you're seeing that, and it's almost that kind of a thing to say, so how do we see ourselves as communication professionals when you now have this thing that is helping you to do more with less?
Yeah. Continue to show your value while at the same time being efficient. Because the efficiencies are there. Kemantha, talk to me about the extent to which the issue of access to digital communications becomes a theme at the summit in the coming days, because it's all fair and fine for all of us to be talking about all of this, as much as it's not in terms of the consumption of data. It may not be on the same level as playing a 30-minute YouTube video for someone sitting in a rural setting without much access to data, but it may be a simple matter of opening a link to social media. But that access issue continues to be an issue. Do you think that conversation is going to come up?
I'm hoping that it does come up. As I said, I'm focusing on crisis comms. So I think Lorato can take that question a lot better than I could in terms of the program. But what I would like to say on that point is that we need to explore communication the way, as you mentioned, bite-sized information. Radio interviews are changing; they're becoming more visual, etc. So the issue around data is a very, very real one for South Africa, and I really do hope we get to explore that more and talk about zero-rated websites, for an example, how to make communication more accessible. But as a student of rhetoric and as a student of government communications, I am very interested in the conversation around rural communication when it comes to government. So I'm really hoping that we zone in on those topics during the conference.
Yeah, Lorato, do you want to pick that point up? Because in fact, if I can add to it, I don't know if USSD counts as social media, but we're seeing a lot of that
digital communications. It's
digital communications, not social media. Because we've seen that being used to a certain extent, right? For instance, in the issue around the SRD grant applications and the likes. At some point, that was one of the options. So talk to me about that, the access gap and how that is addressed.
Interestingly, our keynote speaker, Professor Eldred Jordan, will be speaking to that and, a little bit on his credentials. He was on one of the board members on Mixit. You remember Mixit, South Africa's first social networking platform, which literally had a lot of young people adopting the platform. And the biggest thing, to Kemantha's point, it was that it was zero rated. And that is why the adoption was so huge, right? But also it was to the people's way of communicating. And, for instance, the people in the Northern Cape, the people in Northwest and Limpopo, they often ask us, all of these things talk to X. People in our provinces don't use X. They prefer they prefer Facebook. They prefer WhatsApp. And the biggest thing there is to then look at the reason why WhatsApp and Facebook, they don't eat or they don't consume a lot of data. When you're looking at that. So for us, it's more also how do we ensure that you don't keep a lot of other people outside, because data is expensive, but also they may want to do something else with the money for data rather than being on these platforms.
Kemantha, let me give you the final word then to your main topic of focus around crisis communication. My goodness, do we have a lot of crises breaking out, especially in the age of the government of national unity. Just your overall assessment of what's happening and what is not happening in relation to using social media effectively in crisis communication.
So there's this concept called box turning in communications, which is very important. And that means consumers or even the public sector are becoming, if you have a box and there's a product list there, so they turn it over and they scrutinize all of the ingredients. So this is becoming integral to crisis communication. And during my session, this is what I want to touch on. How do we get to the nitty-gritty of what issues are being raised, and how do we communicate very, very clearly to what people are saying? So if you saw recently, the interest that South Africans had in President Ramaphosa's visit to the United States was, for me as a political rhetoric student, like unprecedented in the amount of communication that happened on social media. So I think that government is doing plenty right, but I think in the conversations that are going to emerge, we're going to find that there's new trends that are coming up that we're going to be discussing. I'm a huge fan of best practice, but I'm a bigger fan of next practice, and that's what we will be focusing on in our crisis constitution session.
All right. I've got to thank you for your time. Thanks to the both of you. That's Kamantha Kavenda, Communications Manager at the Wits School of Governance. We were, of course, in studio with Lorato Tshenkeng, who is CEO of Decode Communications. We hope we've teased it out nicely such that you are now interested in that social media summit for government 2025, and it starts tomorrow.